What's up guys, Wes here from RockyMountainATVMC.com, and this is my 2004 YZ250 bike build. Now my whole goal with this bike was to take a little bit of an older bike and see if I could make it competitive with newer bikes. I love riding two-strokes, and I really just felt like the YZ250 was the obvious bike of choice for this build. The YZ250 is an awesome bike, you guys know. It's been the same for a lot of years, and it's really just an awesome platform to start with. Yamaha really got it dialed early on, and they've made minor changes over the last few years. So some of the more notable changes on this bike is Yamaha revamped the motor in 1999. They changed from the steel frame to the aluminum frame in 2005, and with 05, they also went to their first version of the dual chamber fork. 2006 and later models are really known as the most desirable because they've got the new suspension coupled with that aluminum frame, the triple S forks. But even if you've got a little bit of an older bike, it's really easy to make fit your needs. So I think what makes this bike so great is there's just so dang many of them out there, and it's pretty easy to find a good deal on one and really just make it fit your needs and your type of riding. So I built this bike primarily for off-road racing like WORCS and hare scrambles, but I like to do a lot of different type of riding. I hit the local endurocross races, and occasionally I make it out to the track to keep my butt whips on point. And when it gets too hot in the desert, I'm up in the mountains doing single track. So I love to do a lot of different type of riding. And even though this bike is an 04 YZ250, with the parts and stuff I've added to this thing, it's basically a new YZ250X. We're gonna talk about that. So I picked this bike up for 600 bucks, and I knew it needed some things for that price. I didn't know how bad it was, but a closer inspection revealed all the bearings were shot. The motor was a mess top and bottom, and it really just needed everything. I found out that the previous owner was actually running the wrong air filter cage. It wasn't making a good seal, or really any seal at all. It let a bunch of dirt and sand through and took out the motor. So starting from the bottom, I went with the Wrench Rabbit engine rebuild kit. Those kits are awesome. They come with everything from transmission bearings, main bearings, crankshaft, piston, and full gasket kit. It really was just everything that I needed for the engine, you know, top to bottom. It was awesome. So while I was in the bottom end, I actually decided to install a Yamaha wide ratio transmission kit. And this is the beginning of the YZ250X. It takes third, fourth, and fifth gears from the YZ250X and takes your YZ250 transmission, makes it a wide ratio transmission. So third is actually a little bit closer to second. Fourth and fifth are both a lot taller. So you know, you can haul butt out in the desert. Working our way up the motor, I actually ended up just picking up a new OEM cylinder for this thing. I didn't want to wait for replating, and I wanted to get this thing together as fast as possible. On top of that, I ended up milling the head, and that's just basically just to make up for any lost power riding at the elevation that I do. Luckily, this engine already actually had a full Hinson clutch setup that was in awesome shape. So I just threw in a Tusk competition clutch kit, and then to really finish this motor off, a black Tusk billet aluminum clutch cover and ignition cover really set this thing off. Moving on to performance a little bit, for the exhaust, this bike actually already had an old FMF pipe on it that was in decent shape. I added the FMF Turbine Core 2 silencer to this thing. This is really the go-to for any off-road rider. It keeps the bike quiet, and it has a spark arrestor. So after that, I went to the intake, and I went with a V-Force 3 reed cage. This thing improves power throughout the power range, and it really just smooths everything out. It makes the YZ250 a little bit more rideable. All right, so now let's move on to suspension, chassis, and drive. So 2004 was actually the first year that Yamaha switched from the 46mm to 48mm cartridge forks. And these are actually the same forks that stayed on the WR models for a lot of years. And they're decent forks. They work good, but I knew they could be better. So I ended up sending the forks and the shock to Precision Concepts. Precision Concepts has been around for a long time. They know their stuff, and they actually do a big percentage of the riders at the WORCS series. So I sent my stuff off to them. They freshened everything up. They set it up for my riding style and my skill level, and it feels awesome. It soaks up the big bumps without bottoming out, and it's still plush enough to ride the slower, gnarly stuff. So I really love the setup on this bike. So while I had the suspension off to precision, I continued working on the frame, and all the bearings on this thing were shot. So I went to Pivot WORCS. They really just had every bearing that I needed for this thing, from the steering stem all the way through the swing arm. They make high quality bearings, and it just gave me some peace of mind. So next I added a full chain and sprocket kit from Primary Drive. I went with the cool blue aluminum rear sprocket and a gold X-string chain. It really just sets this thing off. I'm actually still running stock gearing on this thing, and it's working for all my riding conditions. The last thing I want to talk about in this section is my kickstand. I went with the Pro Moto Billet kickstand, and these things are awesome. They look good. They fold way up out of the way when you're not using them, and I don't got to worry about finding somewhere to lean my bike up against. Moving on to protection. Protection is something that's important for really any bike, but it's especially important if you're riding off-road. So I added a ricochet skid plate down below to protect the frame and my engine. I added a blue anodized disc guard in the rear to reduce the odds of bending a rotor, and I added the WORCS Connection radiator braces to really just fortify those in case I have a get off. Up front, I added the Tusk MX D-Flex handguards, and that's going to take us into controls. So after I got a chance to ride the new 2017 KTM and Husky 2-strokes, it really made me realize how bad this thing actually vibrates. So to combat that a little bit, I added the Fasco flex bars and the Impact Moto Pegs. So up top of the flex bars, they've got a special design. It's an elastomer dampener, and it really just helps isolate the grips and isolate that vibration and help with the impacts as well. So it feels buttery smooth up front. This setup also allows me to run my stabilizer, which is a must-have for going fast in the desert. Back down to the foot pegs, there's a ton of options on the market for foot pegs right now, and I needed something with awesome grip and that was going to last a long time. So these foot pegs is kind of the same concept as the flex bars. They just give me one more barrier between the good vibrations of this motor and my feet. With the brakes, I added new rotors front and rear. The front one is an oversized rotor, and I coupled those with new center pads and steel braided brake lines front and rear. That just really tightens up the old squishy brakes on these YZs and makes it so I can push it a little harder in the corners. So I've got those rotors mounted up on a new set of Tusk Impact wheels. This bike, when I got it, actually had some pretty crazy gold wheels on it. The front one's actually a 20-inch wheel, and we haven't sold a 20-inch tire since like '07. So I knew a new wheel set was a must-have. So with the Tusk Impact wheel set, these things are super tough. They're low maintenance, and I actually set up the rear with an 18-inch, so it's just a little more forgiving for off-road riding. These things just look super sick. There's nothing better than a blue bike sitting on some black wheels. So on the wheels, I went with some ultra heavy-duty Bridgestone tubes, and on top of those, I wrapped them in Michelin Starcross 5 tires. That's the medium terrain. These things hook up everywhere. I'm loving these tires. They're predictable, and they really just give me the traction that I'm looking for. Another must-have for this bike was an oversized fuel tank. So I went with the Acerbis 3.2 gallon. It's not the biggest tank you can get for this bike, but it gives me the range that I need for my longer loops. A couple other cool features about this thing: it's got this super long neck up here to brake next to the track, and it's got this cool dual petcock set up to pull fuel from both sides with enough hose to give me a little extra range down below. So to finish this thing off, let's talk about looks real quick. So when I had this thing all torn down, I went ahead and powder coated the triple clamps, the swing arm, and the frame. To go along with that, the frame geometry actually didn't change from the 02 to 04 steel frames to the newer aluminum frames. So I can actually bolt on the 2015 Restyle kit, make this 04 look like a brand new bike. So to wrap those plastics, I had a Tag Graphics build me a full custom graphics kit, and man, did they come through. This thing is one of a kind. So as most of you guys know, the 04 YZ250 was Chad Reed's bike that he won his first Supercross title on. And to kind of pay tribute to that, we took a couple pointers from his factory 04, updated them a little bit, and this thing came out sick. To go along with those looks, I added an Attack Graphics factory seat cover. This thing just keeps my butt in place on the seat, and they've got a couple different colorways to choose from. It looks awesome. Now let's get into some Hotline bling. So I added a bunch of blue and red anodized parts of this thing. They don't do much for performance, but they make the bike look really fast, and that's good enough for me. All right, guys, so that sums it up for my 2004 YZ250 bike build. Now, a lot of times buying a used bike can be a better option for getting yourself into a reliable bike that suits your riding needs for less money. Now, everybody always wants to know, what did it cost to build that bike? I'm actually under 6 grand total investment for this bike, under 5,500 bucks if you minus out the cost of the bike. Now, this is just about every part and accessory that we could throw at this thing we did. And I don't expect you guys to do all this at once, but hopefully this gives you some ideas of ways you can set up and customize your YZ250 to suit your riding needs. Now, obviously we didn't have time to cover all the parts and accessories in this video, so if you want a full detailed breakdown, check out the blog post on our website. Remember that all these parts and accessories are available on our website, so check that out as well. If you guys got buddies that love ripping two-strokes, especially the YZs, make sure and share this, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.